What is the skills first future? Why will skills first approaches widen access to high wage employment and economic mobility? What does skills first mindset mean for education? You're listening to the Getting Smart podcast. I'm Tom Vander Ark, and today I'm joined by Dr. Isaac Agbeshie-Noye. He's the program director for Widening Pathways to Work for the SHRM Foundation. SHRM is the 60-year-old foundation associated with the world's largest HR association. And Isaac is a real champion of skills first approaches. Isaac, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tell us a little more about the SHRM Foundation and this program, Widening Pathways to Work. Any more on the backstory and why the SHRM Foundation was formed, and how new is this Widening Pathways program?
Sure. Happy to jump in there. So the SHRM Foundation is the 501c3, so the nonprofit arm of SHRM, as you mentioned before, which is the Society for Human Resource Management. That network has about 340,000 HR professionals around the globe that are leveraging that network in order to advance their understanding about effective HR practices and how to create a workplace that works for everyone. So the SHRM Foundation, on the foundation side, actually believes that we could leverage all of those HR folks and the organizations that they're connected to actually advance social good. So let's think about what are the things where we need employers to be levers of change, and how can we leverage all of the things that they're doing to advance their business outcomes to also provide us guidance about the types of things we should explore to make the workplace more accessible for everybody. So the Widening Pathways portfolio then under that is really focused on two sides, which I'm sure we'll get into a bit in our conversation today. The first side is focused on skills first initiatives. So I'll explain what that is and where we're hoping to go with that. And then the second side focuses on untapped pools of talent. So we have in the US alone, we have about 7.3 million open jobs. And that is a number that we are very unsatisfied with, because it's not that we have a shortage of people who could be doing those jobs. We just have a shortage in terms of alignment, in terms of getting people on the most express route to get from the skills that they possess to an opportunity to be able to contribute in the world of work using those skills. So the Widening Pathways portfolio is actually designed to try and close that gap a bit by taking the things that we're learning from employers and actually helping to scale them so that more people can adopt some of those practices.
I think your work will benefit all learners and workers, but you focus specifically on a group of populations. How would you describe the focus of your work or your target populations?
Yeah, so when we do deeply believe that if we can create a workplace that actually can see and understand everybody, that then we all are going to benefit. And so we have work that happens in our untapped pools portfolio right now that focuses on persons with disabilities, opportunity youth, so youth age 16 to 24 who are neither in work or employed at the moment. We focus on military community, that includes military spouses, workers over the age of 50, and then persons who have prior criminal records. So those are our 5 areas where we're exploring opportunities to reimagine what the workplace looks like. The purpose being that there's some threading across all of those experiences that actually would help position employers to be able to support anyone. And so we want to figure out what those shared narratives are and how we can best provide guidance or opportunities to try new things, just to make sure that everybody is getting what they need in order to be able to fully contribute to the workplace and also help to advance business goals.
And so for those populations, I want to talk about what is the skills first approach. It's a mindset, it's a paradigm. It's not just skills-based hiring. It's It's really identifying priority skills, creating development opportunities around those skills, and then better signaling systems.
We really view it as a strategy that goes from recruitment all the way to retirement. And so the major part about a skills first future for us is that it's unlocking potential and performance. And we're trying to figure out what are all the signifiers for potential and performance. One of the myths that we often get caught up in is that we're not talking about replacing college degrees at all, but we're trying to figure out what does a certain degree signify that somebody can do? And how can we get employers clearer about that? How can we get education providers clearer about that so that we have or are able to make some of those matches a little easier? And so we're really trying to recognize all the ways that people just build valuable skills, whether that's through a 4-year college education, or maybe it's through a short-term credential, or maybe it's through an on-the-job training and an apprenticeship. Whatever that looks like, you're carrying a toolbox of skills with you. So how do we create some mechanisms for those to be seen, validated, and then leveraged in decision making?
Isaac, there's school systems all over America and a few institutions of higher education that are developing a portrait of a graduate or a learner profile. They're trying to create an outcome framework that identifies priority skills. Does SHRM Foundation have a skills taxonomy, or do you have a way that you try to publicize priority skills?
Yeah, so we have a few ways that we do this. Most recently, we've been working with America Succeeds, and they have a durable skills framework that we lean into a bit in terms of how we talk about what these durable skills are. But we also try to, because we know that this is an area where there have been a lot of folks that are in the space that are working on frameworks and approaches to validate skills that work directly with talent and with people who are going to be eventual job seekers or folks that are current learners. Our area when it comes to SHRM is focused on employers and employer adoption. So how are we taking those taxonomies that we've built to understand what humans can bring to work, and how do we operationalize them in the systems that we use to evaluate humans? So how does that translate to your applicant tracking systems or your HR information systems or to your recruitment life cycle? And so we've been trying to leverage some of the great work that other people have done around identifying what the skills are and going to employers to say, one, how do you translate these job descriptions to speak more to these skills? And then two, tell us about what the experience has been like so far trying to find good matches for your organization, and where those practices have worked, what makes them work, and how can we scale them so that other people will be more excited about adopting them. So we don't see ourselves as a end all be all to determine what skills employers should be looking for, but it's more so trying to help people to understand how do you translate some of the work that's to be done into one of these skills taxonomies, and then how can you better talk about it so that you can actually get the talent pools that you want in order to fill the openings that you have?
Isaac, the skills first approach, particularly skills based hiring, seemed super promising to us, and we thought that skill credentialing would be an important part of supporting more skills based hiring that better signals around the demonstrated skills that a learner and worker have would be really important. And I thought post pandemic the system had flipped to skills based hiring, but I've sensed in the last year a little bit of a drawback from that. Why hasn't skills based hiring become the norm? What are the barriers to scaling skills first practices?
Yeah, I love this question because there are no shortage of them, but I'll try to name a couple that are kind of happening at the same time. And so Employers, generally speaking, are highly engaged and highly interested in adopting a skills first mindset. What we are trying to figure out, or what we're trying to do, and what prompted us to create this Center for a Skills First Future, is that we also know that we have to try and create, as best we can, an easy button for people to start adopting new things. And so change is hard, it becomes very difficult, and you get fatigued by having so much of it. And for anyone that has been operating in the HR space over the course of the last 5 years, you have gone through probably the greatest amount of change fatigue as everyone has. I'm not trying to discount anybody's experience, but there's been so much change in just trying to figure out how to approach talent needs in this age of COVID. And so what usually happens, and this is a very human thing that we do, we go back to the things that we know. And so if we know that some of those things, some of those validators have been easy for us to make decisions quicker in the past, we lean back on those things. And so I think that that's what you're seeing when you identify that it seems like we've taken a couple of steps back in terms of the passion that was there at the beginning doesn't look particularly the same. What will be great that we are continuing to do with our center is to elevate these employer examples, and we try to pull in what different types and different sized organizations do, because it's very hard for a small business to take a look at practices that have worked at a large enterprise organization and figure out how they can apply that with fewer resources, fewer supports. And so we really do try to figure out how can we drill this down to make it most digestible for folks in the context that they are currently in. And how do we then give them a shot to try something out and just see if it works based on how their organization is operating. And so some of it is a change management thing, some of it is kind of just based on the pressures that are around us. We have seen, at least in some statistics, that our unemployment is starting to rise. As a result of unemployment rising, employers have less incentive to try new things because they are not as starved for talent, because there's a lot more talent looking for work. And so we have been trying to figure out how do we keep and maintain the momentum, knowing that we still have, and I'm sure we'll get to thinking about AI and some of the things that are changing the workforce pretty quickly soon, but we have quite a few talent needs that we need to solution for. And so this skills first mindset, in terms of thinking about how to attract these pools, it will just be essential for us to be thinking about the future, because change is still happening very quickly. And as a result, we have the risk of a lot of people being left behind or being left out of the job market, which ultimately isn't useful for people to be able to live a life that's allowing them to sustain themselves and their families.
Isaac, let me get wonky for just a second here. I want to talk about infrastructure. I guess we hypothesized that the digital wallets, credential wallets, are going to be a part of the critical part of the infrastructure to support skills first talent transactions. But we can't figure out where that leadership is going to come from for those learning and employment records. If that's going to be a state leadership, we've seen a few states, we've seen a few regions starting to lead on digital wallets. But are digital wallets going to be an important part of how we capture and communicate our skill credentials and verified experiences? And if that is part of the important part of the infrastructure, where's the leadership going to come from to create access to those for everybody?
Yeah. So there are a few things that are going to have to happen at the same time. And so it's going to actually take a coalition of folks that are coming together to talk about how they relate to the adoption of, just like any other new technology, it's going to take a coalition of folks to come together to kind of figure out how they situate themselves with it. Employers obviously have a role, because They need to be able to see those wallets, to understand what information is being conveyed to them,
Right.
and to relate that directly to the openings that they have available, but to not limit themselves to just leveraging that wallet as an indicator of who's qualified and who's not, because there are just a lot of other indicators that we will need to consider. We're going to have to socialize an entire population of working humans to understand what this means and how it is advantageous to them, what degrees they can trust it, what degrees they own the information that is in it. And so we'll have to do some socialization around that part. We will have to activate some policy levers. So there is clearly a role for government to play. I think that we're trying to figure out what role exactly government is trying to play right now, where we are really leaning in on workforce development, but we're really stepping back on other ways of government intervention. And so this is just a really interesting and kind of confusing time. But the other side of that that is great is that it's actually fertile ground for opportunity for us to figure out, well, what do we want this to be?
Right.
And so all of those, I think that all of those players have a very key role in this. And I haven't even mentioned about the training providers yet. And
No,
so,
I appreciate that answer. It is going to be a series of ecosystem solutions, and these
yeah,
ecosystems will be geographically based. Sometimes they'll emerge in a vertical, sometimes both.
yeah,
But it is local leadership. It matters in these systems, and so we agree on that ecosystem approach. This AI thing is a really seems like a really big deal.
yep,
It seems to be changing the nature of work for many workers. It looks like it will change employment patterns, although that's not clear how and when that will happen, sort of by sector. It looks like it's starting to change skill priorities. What can you tell us about how AI is changing this skills first future?
yeah. So I think the way that you've described it is perfect in that there's a lot of uncertainty coming and no one knows exactly what it is, what it is going to be. I do think that what is happening right now is that some employers are starting to identify that with the use of AI, you may not need as many people to do certain tasks, but it does also then create other opportunities in other areas where you cannot replicate the automation or the type of power that leveraging AI can give you. It doesn't optimize every job. And so we are going to see wide shifts, I think, in what types of work people do, which is natural. That's happened over time. But I heard something the other day at a conference that gave me, I'm very hopeful in this space, but this actually put some things in perspective for me around the idea that when Excel was created, people said, oh, we're done with accountants. We're not going to need any more accountants. And what we've actually found is a surge in the need of accountants, even though we've had this tool that was supposed to make it more accessible for us. The same has happened in radiology, where we thought, well, once AI is able to kind of look and see things that even the human eye might not capture, we might not need any more radiologists. And now we have a shortage of folks in radiology and lots of other things in healthcare, where we thought that automation and AI would kind of help close some of those gaps. So what I do think is going to create is a outgrowth in certain industries and a contraction in others. And the reason why this skills first mindset is particularly important is because people need to know how those things are transferable. Like what you are bringing can actually be applied to something else. I went to college in pursuit of becoming a computer engineer. Midway through, I learned that that wasn't the love story that I should be pursuing. But I realized that maybe something in sociology and education was resonating a little more with the skills I had to offer. And so I had to pivot some of my systems mindset to be able to apply it to that sociology and education context. And I think that it's going to be just a lot of that. And so that's where skills and AI work together. Digital literacy is a key skill that we are all going to have, regardless of your generation. We are all going to have to learn how to navigate and figure out how to upskill ourselves or rely on our employer or our education partners to upskill us. But it is in hopes of creating an ecosystem where you can actually see what types of skills people are bringing to the table to meet the needs that are going to be augmented by AI. And so I don't see this as a situation where we're going to have a population of folks who will have no relevance to the job market. I think that we're just going to see jobs created in different places that we perhaps have not considered before. And we're going to have to be able to prepare people and our systems to pivot to receive those shifts and changes over time.
Well, I appreciate that answer. It does suggest that both employers and learners and workers need to become more metacognitive about the nature of work and the skills required today.
Yeah.
I think your initiative is timely because we all need to be thinking about how the nature of work, how it's changing, and how that should change our talent transactions. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what high schools and colleges should be doing to become more skills first.
Yeah, I think that part of it is being in communication and in community with employers to just understand what types of skills are being valued and validated in the workplace. At the same time, we're wanting for education providers, so on the K through 12 and the higher education, in both of those arenas, I do think it's important for us to be thinking through, and we have tons of frameworks that we can be exploring together. We really do need to be thinking through what types of skills do we feel like people need to have in order to live in the society that we currently have, and to what degree do we create opportunities or experiences, whether they be learning experiences or on the job experiential ones, where do we create opportunities for people to grow in those areas? I think that it is going to be critical for our educator friends to be thinking about that and how that permeates the curriculum on in K through 12 and in higher education. Because I think that you being able to see a through line between how someone has been challenged to develop their skills around communication or collaboration or critical thinking, for you to be able to see a through line in how somebody has done that in K through 12, and then they've been able to fine tune that through the attainment of a credential or through pursuing a 4-year degree. And as a result, that positions them to be able to do X somewhere. Like we need to be able to create some of those more visible through lines so that learners understand why they need to develop certain skills and then where they need to go to gain some of those skills over time. And so there's a key role here that education has to play. We cannot rely simply on people to get that type of training on the job, because we're finding that employers are getting people and then they are disappointed or dissatisfied or both with the skills that those folks are able to furnish in the workplace. And that's not the moment to be having conversations with folks about the skills that need to be developed. We need to be able to be doing it before, and it just needs to be a part of the conversation that people are having when they're thinking about their learning, just in general. And so the earlier we can get people having conversations about that, just understanding this is what I'm good at, this is what I enjoy, this is how I understand what I've learned, this is what I think, this is how I think this might be relevant to something in the future, perhaps tied to the world of work, but also maybe not. We're in a space now where it's not relevant to ask folks as much anymore, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because you are probably going to be like 9 different things. And so getting people in the space to understand what are the skills under that you really want to develop in order to do that thing. That's where the conversation, I believe, is going to need to go. And that's where I think K through 12 and higher education really are supremely positioned to be having those types of conversations with educators and with students now.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Isaac. We have a lot of people ask us, does every school system really need to create their own portrait of a graduate or learner profile? And our answer is the process is the product. It's engaging in the conversation with your community.
Yes.
It's co-creating that skills first ecosystem. That's the important product. Yeah, you may get an outcome framework that identifies some priorities, but the important outcome is the ecosystem of relationships that you build in the process.
Yeah, and it's leveraging, and part of that is also leveraging work that we've already done to try and identify what some of these things are. And this is the role that I think philanthropy can play, is that can we create a setting where we can just try it out and to figure out whether or not this approach works for everybody in the ecosystem. Because once we understand that this is the way it works for employers, this is the way that training providers are leaning into it, this is what it looks like on the learner side. When we can create that type of alignment, now we have a model that we can try to scale, and we can try and control for all of the different contexts that we know are going to be at play, for the differences in locality and the differences within state and geography and demographics. Like, we can think through all of those things if we have a model that we know could work. And so I love what you just said, just around thinking about what are the needs that we can see right in front of us locally. Let's not think about boiling the ocean and what this would look like on a national scale, but let's just figure out what it could look like in your community and just start there. We don't need to actually be solving for every problem at once. We get to a solution just by focusing on some specific things and then figuring out how those learnings could help us grow. And so I think that local approaches are really going to take the day here over time. And, realistically, things are moving really fast, but we know change also happens slow. And so we do have to pace ourselves in terms of what learnings actually look like, and when we have enough evidence to know that something is working well enough that we need to try and grow it and scale it.
We're talking to Dr. Isaac Agbeshie-Noye. He's the program director of Widening Pathways to Work at the SHRM Foundation. As we wrap up, Isaac, a couple questions you could address. What's next for your program, Widening Pathways, and also looking back, what any words of gratitude, any shout outs for people that have really contributed to this program of work to advancing a skills first future?
In terms of next steps, one of the things that we've created, and we've mentioned that we work primarily on the employer side, but we know that that's a key lever in thinking about how we conceptualize skills, how we recognize them and validate them. And so we've created a series of tools to help employers figure out where they are, because without that, it's hard for them to then think through how they're going to partner with K through 12 or higher education on anything. And so we're trying to get that as clear as possible. So if you visit skillsfirstfuture.org, you'll see a suite of tools there that includes a skills action planner. So that's an organizational assessment so that people can see where they are in terms of this skills first approach. We have a library with over 500 tools in it so that people can see practices that have been tested so that we can figure out what to scale that would work. We have a vendor database there. So if you are ready as an employer to jump in, then it can connect you with providers to help support your capacity. I think that sometimes school districts and higher education institutions forget that they are employers also. And so there will be a lot of conversation about skills first approaches, but they will not be employing it in their HR practice. And so that's always a place to consider before you try and test any of this on students. Test it with the people who are working there, because you have a fertile ground and a captive audience there. And then the last thing I'll just mention is that we have this specialty credential, so that as people are trying to figure out how to lead and sustain skills first strategies, we have a learning tool for you to leverage. And so all of that is packaged in our suite of options with the Center for Skills First Future. So I encourage folks to join in there. What makes that particularly unique, which leads to your second question about thank yous and acknowledgments, is it's powered by the SHRM Foundation, but we did not build it alone. We brought together a coalition of 14 organizations that are doing things in the talent space, that are doing things in philanthropy. And because we wanted us to all be having a conversation about this together and not necessarily, and not in competition, not in isolation, but really trying to figure out what is it that we do? How do those lanes intersect with each other? And how can we actually work together to try and imagine what this future looks like and to then make it accessible for as many people as possible. So my special shout outs, in addition to you for having me on this show, is to those partners for their continued engagement and getting us to be able to launch something that hopefully will be helpful to other folks.
Isaac, we appreciate your work. We appreciate the commitment of the SHRM Foundation to a skills first future. I love that you're doing this in a collaborative way, sort of trying to nurture ecosystems of better hiring and development practices. Thanks for your commitment. Thanks for the long-term commitment from SHRM. And thanks to our producer, Mason Pasha, and the whole Getting Smart team for making this possible every week. And till next week, keep learning, keep leading, and keep innovating for a skills-first future.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.